Okay, it's 9:37. We're going to start again with our next agenda item, which is the treasurer election. I'm hoping that perhaps now, maybe at a later time, we could have a discussion about process. The treasurer election is somewhat ill-defined in our bylaws. It's a little different than any of the other elections, and maybe it has to be in certain respects, but it seems to me that we could put some general guidelines in to make it more similar to the president-elect's process, whereby people need to identify themselves as running by a certain date, encouraged to submit materials, just strengthen, I think, the process, the questions, and then there's less chance for misunderstanding later on about how we do this. So for this election, since we didn't have that, we discussed, as you can, how the bylaws in point 6.D.2 limit or give us some guidance, but not much. Nominations may be taken from the floor. Each candidate will have up to 20 minutes to address the board and take questions. Candidates will be asked to leave the room during each other's interviews. The election will be conducted by secret electronic ballot, including in the event that there is only one candidate. So those are the guidelines we have right now. I encourage, if anybody has suggestions or wants to discuss them, let's do that before we launch into nominations from the floor and then presentations. So do we have any questions, concerns? Not seeing any. Governor
Mr. President? Yeah.
Governor Stevens, followed by Governor Knight.
Okay. So I just was thinking about one of the things you said. I would not want us to have the same process as the president-elect. That is because there is only a limited, by our bylaws, a limited field of candidates or possible candidates, and that field is the sitting, in fact, attorney members on the Board of Governors. And for those reasons, I would not suggest that we at least adopt policies that would say, well, if you didn't decide to run a week before the election, you can't run, since it's only the governors by the governors. And while I think the material is good and a good thing for the voters, the small universe of voters, which is again the Board of Governors, we shouldn't make this so cumbersome that if we only had one candidate, that person is then locked in and nothing else can happen. It's different from being the president-elect, which is open to all members from around, all active members. So I would say try to keep that simpler and especially not get as complicated, because actually the candidates are people we know and the voters are people they know. So, that's my take.
Thank you, Governor Stevens, and I appreciate that perspective. And that's kind of what I was asking for, is let's talk about this a little bit and make sure that we're all comfortable with the process. Governor Knight.
I nominate Bryn Peterson.
Thank you. We have a nominations of Bryn Peterson, and he was on the agenda. We have one nomination. Do we have any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Brent Williams-Ruth.
All right, we have a nominations for Governor Williams-Ruth. Any additional nominations? All right, going once, going twice. All right, we have two nominations, Governor Peterson, Governor Williams-Ruth. As according to my notes here, we're going to give each candidate 20 minutes to address the board. Candidates, do you have a preference for who goes first? Well, the person who goes first, then the other candidate will exit the room, as I understand our procedure now. So no preference. All right, Governor Peterson, are you all right with that? Okay. All right, Governor Williams-Ruth has left the room. And so I will turn this over to Governor Peterson for your up to 20-minute presentation.
Well, as usual, I'll be fairly brief. I don't have a formal presentation. I've it's been really an honor and a pleasure to be part of this committee, be part of the BNA committee for the last 2 years. It's something that I really enjoy doing, and I think I have the right skill set, to be the right person, for this job for next year. The main purpose, though, is really to answer any questions that anybody, any of you may have. So I'm going to go ahead and open up for questions.
All right. Thank you, Governor Peterson. Any questions for Governor Peterson? Governor Stevens.
Good morning, Governor Peterson. I just wanted to get a context from you in terms of your approach. And what I'm talking about in particular is we have kind of gone back and forth about the license fees and reducing license fees. But let me just ask you, is your approach or the approach you want to take one that kind of snips around at the edges to try to reduce, I don't know, salaries or reduce rent or reduce this or that to back into reducing the license fee? Or is it that you would take a look at X amounts that one might reduce, review what that impact looks like as we decide whether or not we reduce license fees?
Sure. So I kind of take your question as kind of two-pronged. So I'm gonna kind of answer what I think is your, you asked about approach. So I wanna answer your question as approach first. Really as to the approach, I really consider myself a bridge builder. Somebody that really wants to reach out. And I think you can attest to this, Governor Stevens. I really want to listen to everybody. And, at the end of the day, the decision's going to be made by the Board of Governors, right? And the decision's going to be made by the Budget and Audit Committee. I kind of see myself approach-wise as, building bridges and working together, with the WSBA staff and also the BNA, committee members, right? So approach-wise, being a facilitator and, building bridges, because we're all in this together, right? And, the WSBA staff is one of our critical tools to, benefit and help the members. So I feel that's a critical thing to point out. As to the dues, I don't have a set agenda there, Governor Stevens. I really don't. We've made a pledge or a aspirational goal to keep, fees flat for as long as we can. And I want to, try to do that to the best of our ability, but I don't have an agenda. I think getting feedback from the members, we can better determine where maybe we spend more money in one area and, maybe spend less money in other areas if that's what the members really want and we get clear direction. But I don't have any agenda to reduce fees or anything like that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Stevens. Governor Peterson, President-elect Tollefson.
I have two questions. I'll ask both questions and then you can answer them whatever order you want. First question is, for years, I've been wondering how come we don't have any kind of a cost benefit analysis done of the different programming at the Bar Association. And there are programs that I think maybe the Budget and Audit Committee ought to be looking at sunsetting because they are either no longer necessary or more importantly, they might be duplicative of what's available in other institutions throughout the state. The other question I have is, what are your thoughts about trying to move the budget process a little earlier into the year? What seems to happen is that the budget engine, so to speak, doesn't seem to get going until real late in the fiscal year. And by the time September rolls around, nobody really has time to, do any fine tuning or anything like that. It's just you take this budget or you leave it. The role of the Board of Governors is to approve the budget. In order to approve the budget, you got to know what's in the budget. In order to know what's in the budget, you got to have time to digest the information. And I don't think so. What are your views and thoughts about those two questions? Thanks.
Yeah, no, they're both very good questions. And, being on the Budget and Audit Committee the last 2 years, I think I'm in a good position to kind of take us forward maybe on both of these points. But, as far as the cost benefit analysis, I've always, as you know and others know, I'm always data driven. I think Executive Director Nevitt's data driven. I think CFO Perez is data driven. So I think when it comes to the first question, I think we're all on the same page and we all need to keep striving towards more of a data driven approach in terms of, what we do and don't do with the really limited supply of money that we have. As to your second question, I do agree with you. It may be helpful to, put this earlier in the year, but that is something I'd really need to talk to, Executive Director Nevitt and CFO Perez and make sure that if we can do that, does that make sense? But conceptually, I think that makes sense and it's something we should discuss. Does that answer your questions?
Thanks very much. Thanks, Governor Peterson and President-elect Tollefson. Governor Dresden.
Thank you. Hi, Bryn. I have a few questions for you. And I guess I'd like to start with I think Al touched on this a little bit, but just in terms of just philosophy of being treasurer, what you think the role entails. And I think both in terms of the relationship that the appropriate relationship that you ought to have with CFO Perez and the executive director, and and sort of like what's the responsibility of the treasurer, what things are the responsibility of maybe the committee at large and the CFO, and is it more policy driven? Is it more getting into the really looking at the line items of each budget? So I guess I'll start with that. Just sort of what's your philosophy of the appropriate relationship between the treasurer and the various constituent parts of the Budget and Audit Committee and the staff, and how that, and sort of how that would guide your approach as treasurer.
I'm not sure I exactly understand your question, but let me answer in a way that I think answers what you're driving at. And if I don't answer it in a way that satisfies you, please follow up. My philosophy as a treasurer is really to be a facilitator, facilitate the discussions, help the committee, help the staff work together in a cooperative and friendly manner to, hopefully come to conclusions that, win-win, right? I mean, try to always figure out ways that we can do a win-win. As far as working with staff, I think working with Tara and CFO Perez and everybody else on the staff is very important. And so I would take that very seriously as a treasurer, and working together and being a facilitator, and looking to build bridges and having a data centric approach, I think, is the key.
Thanks. That's I was having trouble with my microphone. Let me just follow up a little bit. I guess I wonder if you could maybe clarify that a little bit in terms of where you see the role of the treasurer ending and the role of the CFO beginning. Is it the treasurer's role to come up with or sort of guide the fiscal policy of the organization? I mean, I think you've talked very appropriately about bridge building and facilitating, but I guess sort of where do your ideas come in, and sort of what role does your sort of personal philosophy play in how you see your role?
Well, that's actually something where if I am elected, that's the first discussion I'm going to have, right? So it is going to be a discussion with Executive Director Nevitt and CFO Perez, and figuring out what makes sense, right? I mean, I don't want to dictate, what my role should be or not be. I want to talk to all the parties involved and find out what makes sense to all the parties, and then move forward that way. I don't see my role as being a dictator. I see my role as being a facilitator and a bridge builder.
Okay, thanks. So I know we've talked on the budget and audit committee, sort of about reserves and sort of what we ought to be doing with the reserves. And I think since I'm on the committee, I'm fairly familiar with, I think, your position on that. But I think perhaps it might be helpful for the larger board of governors to hear sort of what you think. What we ought to be doing with the reserves to the extent that we have excess reserves, and if you have sort of an idea of either a policy that we ought to implement, some things that we ought to be doing that we're not doing, some things that we have to stop doing that we are doing, that sort of thing.
Well, I think we should keep the reserves as high as possible. I guess I'd start with that comment. I also think that we should try to have a somewhat balanced, if in a perfect world, we'd have a balanced budget every year. I realize that may not happen, but in situations where we do not have a balanced budget, but if we use some reserves, we don't have to, increase the dues to our members. I would be a proponent of using the reserves in a judicious manner so that the fees to our members is not raised.
Thank you. Does anybody else have questions?
Yeah, Governor
Okay.
Stevens.
I'm going to cede to Governor Stevens. I may have some
well,
questions, but I want to let other people.
Governor Dresden, you're on a roll, so I'll wait till you've exhausted your questions.
Okay, fair enough. I don't want to hog the microphone here. Well, I guess I have one more question for now, and I guess it sort of has to do with sort of relationship with staff and sort of the role of staff. And I know there are issues that come up from time to time on terms of both promotions, cost of living increases, and general things. I mean, I think, how much of that do you think is up to the treasurer to make those kinds of decisions? How much of it, either is or should be, and sort of how do these sorts of discussions of, and particularly talking about staff pay, because I think this is the budget, right? We're talking about money here, and I think so how much of that is or should be on the purview of the treasurer, and sort of do you have a sort of position on how those issues relate to the role of the treasurer?
Yeah, I'm not sure that as the treasurer, I would necessarily have an opinion on that. I think that really is those type of decisions are up to the budget and audit committee members. Personally, I think we need to have raises. We need to keep salaries at a rate that's commensurable with the area for the position. Going back to my earlier point, I think we need to be data driven. We haven't done, no fault of anybody, but we haven't done any studies as to, what certain positions should be paid for certain people and what raises should be or shouldn't be. We need to be data driven in everything. But should we be paying a comparable wage for a position in Seattle? Absolutely. Do we want talent to remain at WSBA? Absolutely. So I guess from a personal point of view, I think we need to keep pace. Does that answer your question?
That's helpful. Yeah, thank you. Okay. I will pass the mic over to Governor Stevens.
Thank you, Governor Dresden and Governor Peterson. Hopefully, Executive Director Nevitt has been keeping time. We're probably approaching 20 minutes. So, Governor Stevens, I'll turn it over to you, but I think we're running up against the clock.
Okay, that's fine. But there's something you said continuously about building bridges. And so I want to understand what bridges you feel need to be built. What bridges are in disrepair? When somebody says, I want to build bridges, I don't know that they do that because everything is great, but they do that because they have concerns. So please elucidate a little bit more on what you mean by building bridges, what needs to be done, and what can you do as the treasurer?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Governor Stevens. I think the situation right now is actually pretty good. I know there's potentially, as you know, I mean, because you've been on the budget and audit, some of the issues come up and it's a win-win, right? So it's easy for everybody to be, happy and, friendly and, great, It's so I'm not worried about those issues, right? Because those issues don't need tending to, right? Where you run into trouble, and you know this because you were on BNA with me last year, there are some issues that aren't win-win, right? I mean, it's you want them all to be win-win, but there's a limited pie, and how you split that pie up, the devil's in the details, right? So when you start drilling down, it's not a win-win, and to be able to work with fellow governors on the BNA and also the staff. I mean, staff's obviously very important. To be able to work with everybody and to, one thing I think is very important is, it's okay to disagree, but do it respectfully. Do it in a manner that doesn't hurt people's feelings. And if you hurt somebody's feelings, go and talk to them, right? Listen to people, right? I mean, honestly, don't go into these meetings and have a preconceived notion of what you're going to do. That's not right. Listen to people, and maybe you'll change your mind. And, my motto would be, have fun and do good. That'd be my motto. Let's really work at, we keep on talking about having a better relationship with everybody. Let's start doing it. And, if I was treasurer and people weren't being respectful of other people, I would take the time to talk to them after the meeting and look to correct things like that, because it's not necessary and it's not productive. Did that answer your question, Governor Stevens?
Thank you. Yes, it does.
Thank you, Governor Stevens. Again, we're short on time, but Governor Clark?
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So two things, Bren. First of all, can you explain to us why you think, what separates you from the other one, as far as why, as far as a vote goes?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a very good question, Dan. First of all, I was a business minor in college. I have an LM in tax from University of Washington School of Law. I worked at Deloitte Tax for 2.5 years in the state and local taxation department. I'm very good with numbers, and more importantly, the other person running against me has no experience on B&A. So I have no idea why anybody would select somebody to be the treasurer of an important committee that has no experience on that particular committee. I'm sure, obviously I think he's a great guy, but simply has no experience. And I think it'd be a huge mistake to select him.
Okay, thanks, Brent. The first one. The second one would be, this board made a commitment to keep license fees flat through 2026 last fall. And as we move forward, we have several, we have staff salaries, we have, the move, several other things. How would you prioritize that compared to other things?
Well, first of all, I think that is important. Treasurer Clark, as you know,
Okay.
and that does go back to, kind of what Governor Stevens was talking about. Well, how do you handle situations where, it's a limited pie, and you know what I'm saying? If we're going to, really work hard to meet what we've promised to the members, how do we do that, right? Because, and that's tricky. And I think the other reason that I should be elected is because I have those interpersonal skills, and the ability to bring people together and unify and hopefully get to that goal in a way that everybody is happy. So, but I do think that goal is important. Does that answer your question?
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Governor Clark. Thank you, Governor Peterson. I think we are now at 21 minutes. So I will extend the same amount of time to Governor Williams-Ruth. I'll ask President Majumdar to retrieve Governor Williams-Ruth and escort Governor Peterson from the room. Governor Williams-Ruth, welcome back. The presentation and questions with Governor Peterson took 21 minutes. So we're going to extend your time by 1 minute for presentation and questions that any of the board of governors might have. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Governor Williams-Ruth, for your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. President. I accept this nomination to be a candidate for treasurer for a real basic reason. And that is that from the very first meeting when I was sworn in as a governor, I have made it clear my position regarding the fiscal policy should be first and foremost to not balance the budget of the association on the backs of our staff. Throughout the year, I have continued to see comments and policies that concern me regarding the way in which we appreciate the various programs and the people who are actually running them on a day-to-day basis. In addition, I believe that the treasurer should be leading conversations and policy regarding the fiscal matters of the association and not necessarily into the day-to-day balance sheets, deposits, and expenses. I believe that the treasurer should be looking for alternate ways in which they can achieve the financial needs of the association without being limited to what has been done or what is currently being done. For example, just this morning, we had the issue of the headquarters of the WSBA brought up again by a member of the public. It's something that's been brought up and is being discussed by the Long-Term Strategic Planning Council. And one of the things that I've always been curious about is the WSBA in its quasi-organizational state being subject to the plenary authority of the Supreme Court, subject to the Bar Act, do we have the same right as, for example, the state colleges and universities to issue bonds to on a vote of the members that would allow us to construct or build or buy capital projects? I don't know the answer to that question, but I believe that's something that should be a conversation that's looked into as we are looking at 2026 ahead and where we're going. And if the idea, I mean, these are all the things that go into the long-range strategic planning. I also believe that our treasurers should be a vocal advocate and that they should be willing to stand up and state without any equivocation to what their policies are. I believe that if we have issues with our budget, that we, as the elected members, be the ones that come forward and say, this is where I believe a change should happen. And that it shouldn't be incumbent upon our staff to make policy decisions regarding finances. Again, this will be something that I will speak on again tomorrow when the Personnel Committee comes forward to talk about the presentation for the climate survey and the roles of the staff and the BOG. And so it's with those reasons that I've been pondering, and after great consideration and discussion with my husband as to what would be in my best interest and what I believe is in the best interest of the association, that I gladly accept the nomination to be a candidate for treasurer. And with that, I will answer any questions I can.
Thank you, Governor Williams-Ruth. Going to look for any virtual hands. Governor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning, Governor Williams-Ruth. So certainly we hear from time to time and discuss the issue of the, where is WSBA located? But there's also a continuous discussion regarding license fees with a vision that's not always well stated about reducing license fees, not just keeping them flat. What I'd like to know from you, or even if you keep them flat, but what I'd like to know from you is if I posit two approaches, I'd like to know what your preference is, and maybe there's a third way. One approach is to what I call look around the edges. So we, hold down raises, we cut back on a program here or there, kind of trying to snip around the edges to the point that there may be a discussion then on reducing license fees. That's one way. I call it the, snipping around the edges and making this move and that move to get you to a certain point. The other is to say, I would like to actually have us have the discussion that says, suppose we reduce fees by $50, $100, $150. What would be that result and which way we should go so that we actually have a fuller discussion if what somebody's aim really is X amount of dollars to be reduced in license. I just like to know, and that's the way I've seen some of this go, but I'd like to know what would be your preferred approach. And I've given you two, but we don't always just have binary choices. So I leave it to you to also posit a third way if that's what you want to do.
Thank you, Governor Stevens. I will say that I actually don't prefer either of those two choices and prefer a third choice where we continuously are increasing our dues. That our dues should not stay stagnant, that they should be slowly increased over time. And I again would ask the public to think of a homeowners association, where in my own homeowners association, they had the dues set at $37 a month and then did everything they could to not raise dues. And for 8 years, they didn't, only to then be realizing that they were failing in their fiduciary duties and were running a risk of legal liability, that they then had to increase in 1 year our dues from $37 a month to $89 a month, which then caused a great uproar and discussion as to, well, why had this happened in the first place? I believe that we should be, one of the policy things that we should be examining is ways in which we could legally and lawfully return our surplus that happens at the end of any fiscal year back to the members. In our current situation, we're not allowed to do that because that would be considered a gift and that's illegal. But that doesn't mean that where we are now has to be where we are in the future. You know, many people are familiar with co-ops, and not to say that that is the actual, that's a term of art, and not to say that that's what I would be proposing, but it's something that I would spend my time looking into so that way we can maintain a steady dues. Because in my view, it would be to reduce dues in a 1 to 2 year period to pay down the reserves that we have. Once those reserves are gone, we must then increase or have catastrophic cuts because we don't have the revenue that we would need to achieve what we've been doing. And I also believe that our association, as we heard from the executive director and the president on the listening tour, the programs that exist within the WSBA are well received and utilized by people that we're connecting with in our listening tours. And I believe that we are, and have heard from staff at our last meeting, and even at the nominations committee, we're hearing that there are not enough people. And so we are never going to be able to get to where we want to be in delivery of service to our members and to the public if our approach is to continuously looking for ways to reduce costs. So that is where I would want to lead a discussion and see how that plays out. And ultimately, it would be a discussion with the board as to what the board's policies are, and where the majority of the board goes is where we would be. But that is where I, as treasurer, would lead the conversation.
Thank you, Governor Williams-Ruth. President-elect Tollefson, followed by Governor Dresden.
Governor Williams-Ruth, I asked these questions of the other candidates, so I wanted to make sure I get the same input from you. Not that I'm a voter, but first question I'd like you to answer, and I'm going to give you both questions. You can answer them whatever order you want. I've been asking for years why this, the Bar Association, why the Budget and Audit Committee in particular doesn't do some sort of cost benefit analysis. So we don't know if there are some programs that are still beneficial to the members, for example, because we don't do a cost benefit analysis. We don't know if some programs are duplicative of what might be available in other, I used the word institutions when I asked it last time, but you can, other entities would be another way to put it. And so I'd like to know what your feelings and thoughts are about the Budget and Audit Committee starting to do some kind of cost benefit analysis on the different programs that the Bar Association is responsible for. Next thing is what's your attitude or thought about moving the budget process earlier into the year? I know you have budget and audit meetings all year long. Many of them get canceled. The bottom line is it seems like we always have a rush to approve the budget at the end of the year. Now, and I told the other candidate this, so I'll tell you this, the same thing. The big role of one of the big jobs of the Board of Governors is to approve the budget. In order to understand the budget, you got to have time to digest the information in the budget and ask questions and see if there's any fine tuning that can be done. But we don't get that ever. It's all at the end. So what are your thoughts about moving the budget process into earlier in the year? Thanks.
Thank you, President-elect Tollefson. I appreciate both of those questions and agree, and I'll just take them in the order presented. In terms of a cost-benefit analysis, I believe it is absolutely imperative. However, I don't believe that it would necessarily be determinative. There are many member wellness programs that may save the life of 3 or 4 attorneys who are in need of it and wouldn't have any other place to have achieved that. But yet, if you're positing a situation where there are alternatives, then I would look to streamline and make sure that those are, for example, I'm just going to make up a hypothetical. Say there's a member wellness program that is a benefit to members of the Tacoma-Pierce County Bar Association that is similar to what the Bar Association offers, but you must be a member of Tacoma-Pierce County Bar Association. Now, anyone, and I pick on them because I grew up in Tacoma and Pierce County area, But many of them, you can join an association even if you've never practiced in their courts by simply joining. But it would be another way to say, well, just in case you ever need help with any mental health, or maybe you've got a substance abuse issue and you're looking for assistance, that you'd only get that through this other association. So I would absolutely look at where those are and to see if it would be a comparable apples to apples analysis. In terms of the budget process, you may recall when you were president-elect and I was first sworn in, that I was brought in for a meeting specifically to address a budgetary issue. And I said what you just said in my own way, which was, I just was sworn in at 8 o'clock this morning, and you're now asking me to weigh in and make a decision on the budget of a $25 million organization, and I can't do it. And so I asked for a month where we pushed off that decision. I then, one of my very first questions was, why is it that we have a fiscal year that ends in September and not January? And is it even possible for us to move to a calendar year where people would be allowed to have the budget process, not during the summer, but in the fall, with approval before we adjourn for the year in December? As just one way. Now, and it could move either way, either forward or backward. But I agreed that having it occur during the summer, as I earlier reported with the bar task force, a lot of people are gone. And it really just doesn't seem like it's the most conducive where people can put the time and energy into digesting, into learning, because I believe that we do need to make informed decisions. It shouldn't be a hip check or this is what my buddy on the board is doing, and so I'm going to go along and get along, because I don't believe in going along and getting along. I believe that you should stand up for what you believe in and voice your opinions. So I would absolutely be supportive of looking at ways, because, and again, I learned that we can move to a different fiscal year. And it would be a process, it'd be a pain in the ass for that 1 year, but it is possible. So the question you asked is whether we could move. The answer I learned from last year is yes, we could. It would just do some work. And there would be a cost associated to it. Speaking as a treasurer, there will be a cost to make that move.
Thank you, Governor Williams-Ruth, Governor Dresden, followed by Governor Clark. And we have about 7 minutes left.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. Hi, Brent. You mentioned briefly in your opening remarks about sort of your philosophy of being treasurer and sort of what it is and what it isn't. I wanted to ask you to clarify a little bit more on that. Sort of what you see as the appropriate things for the treasurer to do, and in particular, the relationship between you and the other members of the Budget and Audit Committee, and also the CFO and Executive Director. So that's my first question.
Thank you, Governor Dresden. I believe that the treasurer should act with Budget and Audit the same way our president does, and that it's a collaborative, that the Budget and Audit, when especially having policy considerations, if anyone had a policy discussion or issue that they wanted to bring forward to start at Budget and Audit, that would be an open and welcome opportunity, because again, that is where I believe that the policy should start their initial conversation. In terms of the relationship with the staff, I believe that we have an amazing professional financial staff, and we have an audit that we paid a pretty penny for that said that they do a good job following the fiscal policies, and that I don't believe that my role would be in there to micromanage those, but to then work collaboratively with them in an oversight capacity to make sure that things are being done. Know when deadlines are, know when reporting is done, is information available that is to be available. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. I'm gonna just try to be quick because I know Governor or Treasurer Clark has some questions as well. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit, if you've thought about this, if you have an idea of what, as you know, we have considerable reserves, and if you have a particular policy that you as treasurer would like to implement, or if you have thoughts on sort of what our as an organization, our policy ought to be. And I think it's both in terms of the size of them, when and how we ought to spend them down, whether we ought to invest some of those reserves, those sorts of things.
Well, I have thought about it specifically in the context of the budget in lieu of a dues raise, and I do not support using them for that, because again, I would like this to be a hand-in-hand conversation with where we're going for the future of the headquarters. What if we need that money to be used as a down payment? Now, if we could issue bonds, we wouldn't necessarily need to keep that in reserve. But again, it's a bigger conversation where, again, my initial philosophy as it relates to our budget that we're going to be dealing with this weekend is if we spend down those reserves, we're going to have a budget that once those reserves are gone, we will have to either make drastic cuts or raise dues significantly down the road. And I believe having a slower increase over time is more fiscally responsible. In terms of what to do with the money, I in my professional and personal life, when it comes to finances, I'm extremely conservative. I believe that we need to maintain and never put at risk the question of those reserves. For example, on a bigger issue in the country, I am not for privatizing Social Security and giving people the ability to take it and invest it in the stock market. I would not want to do the same thing without there being it in a safe, slow growth. Because again, when it comes to the finances, I want those reserves are there for a reason. And what I would ultimately like to do is return them back to the members through a different structure, if that became possible. And then they would see, hey, we had some years where we grossly exceeded our needs. And so we had this reserves, we're sending it back to you, but here's what our budget is for next year. So if I pay $475 in dues, but I get a $25 check back at the end of the year, that's what I would prefer.
Governor Dresden, can I go to Governor Clark and then come back to you?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Governor Williams-Ruth. Governor Clark.
Sure. Thank you, Kyle. Brent, a few questions. One, what would you say? Why should we vote for you and not the other one?
Well, again, I am not here to say that I am anything other than what I am presenting. I believe that I have presented a very clear and specific direction as to who I am as a candidate. And again, since I wasn't present for Governor Peterson's presentation, I can't draw any distinctions other than when I spoke with him at length on Wednesday morning with the idea that he would be receptive to my ideas of looking at alternative ways of doing fiscal policy, his response was not as receptive as I would hope, which is why I finally decided that the only way to ensure that my view is one that will be not quieted was by being a candidate myself.
Okay. Can you talk to us about what your understanding is of what B&A does? I don't ever remember seeing you at one of these ones prior. So you'll be, I mean, assuming you win this election, you'll run it. So can you, yeah, I mean, you know what I mean?
Correct. And the way I would run them are not necessarily the same way in which they've been run in the past. How I vision a budget and audit meeting is that we would have a connection with our CFO to have a high line review of where we are in the current strategy for fiscal, if any adjustments need to be made, and then spending our time looking at the fiscal policies that are ahead that can be working in conjunction, for example, with long-range strategic planning, and really making it more about the policy behind our budget and not so much into the actual numbers.
Okay, and then I guess a final thing that I would ask is you had said that you support staff certainly, and that's great. And you also said that you support not using reserves. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I would ask you, given that we give between a 3 and a 3.5% raise each year for staff, how do you propose we pay for that then each year?
Thank you. I've been told I have 1 minute, and the answer is that first, the 3% raise is not actually even given equally to the employees across the board. We have issues where there's some pay disparities where we're needing to give people higher raises to bring them up into a more equitable position. What we're doing is not even covering the adjusted inflation. And I believe that we should be raising our dues, and we should have been all along. And that is where I plan to advocate a position, because what the budget has right now is enough for 5 promotions out of a total staff of more than 125 people. And when I asked Executive Director Nevitt if this was where she wanted to be or if she wanted more, she never asked for any more because she knew that it was going to be a fight to get 3%. And so what I want to do is create a situation where our executive team can come to budget and audit in a way that they are able to present what they're actually seeking, in a way that we can treat the staff in the way that our executive leadership team wants to. And then we can have a policy discussion regarding whether we're able to get there at once or if it would be incremental.
Okay, thank you, Brent.
Sorry, that's time. We'll invite Governor Peterson back into the room. Welcome back, Governor Peterson. We've completed the time for questions and answers. We will now go into deliberations. So we'll open it up to the Board of Governors for any thoughts, not questions, but thoughts, comments, arguments related to the election. Governor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. President. So this is not a question for either of you, but a comment from me. I really do resonate with some of the, or one of the questions that the president-elect had regarding the budget process. So I'm going to put on the table my ask, which is the ask I gave to Treasurer Clark, and something I believe we need to do. The first thing is, my ask is that as early as possible, there be a budget retreat. And the purpose of that retreat at the front end of the year is to give all the members of the Board of Governors a grounding on the budget, not the budget process, but what's in the budget, where is it located, and have governors ask any and all questions they may have. Some of those may get into questions about performance. But I would hope that we would do that and take the time separately, not as a part of a Board of Governors meeting, but a separate retreat to actually ground everybody on the budget. The second piece, and so I also agree with President-elect Tolleson that as early as possible, the budget process should begin. And that's whether or not we have our fiscal year as we've established it or our calendar fiscal year, but with the idea that within 6 months of adoption, we actually have a proposed budget that people can then have conversations about and discussions about. And so I would leave that to you, because, you know, having been on budget and audit, I guess for 3 years, and this is my first year not, one of my real concerns were we were at the end when then people wanted to try to tinker, wanted to try to comment. And I mean, at the end, meaning we were at the next to the last meeting when the budget was actually presented and the last meeting to adopt the budget. And that's not the way to do business. So that's my comment and my ask of both of you.
Thank you, Governor Stevens. Any other governors? Governor Dresden.
Thank you, President Cicchetti. Yeah, I just wanted to thank both candidates for for stepping forward and putting their names forward. This is being a treasurer as I mean, it's a lot of work, as maybe not quite as many hours as Treasurer Clark puts in right now, although it's, no matter what, it's a lot of work and a pretty big responsibility. And I think both of you have shown, real interest and that you thought you've given careful consideration to what it would be to sort of to be treasurer and sort of be overseeing fiscal policy for the organization. And I really appreciate you speaking to us and engaging in a meaningful conversation. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Dresden. Governor Clark.
Thanks, Kyle. Well, I would say as the outgoing one, it's been a real honor the last 2 years to serve in this role, first of all. And with that said, though, I will say that the last 2 years, Bran has been on, and he's never missed one of these. He's volunteered for everything that there has been to ask for. He's been very engaged. I think Bran, of the two candidates, likely would be able to hit the ground running at a faster pace. And I don't mean that in any disrespect. I say that because he served the last 2 years. But yeah, so thank you.
Thank you, Governor Clark. Any other comments before we move into a secret vote? Not seeing any virtual hands. I'm not seeing any actual hands.
Mr. President,
Governor Stevens.
just so I'm clear, those comments not only for governors, but anyone else in attending if they have comments to make.
We have a little time, so we can open it up to the public too. And I'm scanning. Maybe Rex can help me with the phone. *9. Not seeing any.
If you're attending by phone, *9 to raise your hand.
Okay. It doesn't look like we have any additional comments, so we'll go ahead and close deliberations. We'll do a roll call to determine ballots here, but I see Executive Director Nevitt's hand.
I just wanted to ask if we could do a roll call. And then I guess while I'm talking, I'll note that once we've confirmed the governors that are present, we will send you an electronic secret ballot. It'll be very similar to the process that we did for the president-elect. If you do not receive the ballot shortly, go ahead and email myself and Shelley Bynum, and we'll make sure to problem solve that.
Okay, I will proceed with a roll call. Governor Angeville.
Present.
Governor Higginson. Governor Boyd.
Here.
Governor Clark.
Here.
Governor Grabicki.
Here.
Governor Pertzer. Governor Dresden.
Here.
Governor Sayani.
Present.
Governor Williams-Ruth.
Here.
Governor Peterson. Governor McBride.
Here.
Governor Abel. Governor Knight.
Here.
Governor Stevens.
Here.
All right. Then we'll go ahead and proceed forward with the voting.
Let me check with just Shelley on timing. Shelley, can you let us know when you have sent the ballot so that we can know how much time we should be expecting for it to arrive?
She's giving us the thumbs up.
Okay.
All right, so we'll recess for right now and go and.
Mr. President,
Governor Stevens.
just a question. So is that by email or is it in the chat? Will it be
It's
in the
by
chat?
email. Every
Okay. Thank you.
governor, yeah, in your email.
All right, any further questions? Yeah, let's plan to resume around 10:45. If we need more time, we'll let you know. All right, we're in recess. That was the immediate past president's fault.
My bad.
11:45. Yes.
And General Counsel Shanklin and President Shigetti, I'm going to pull you into a breakout room to review the results once they're done.
All right, thank you. Yes, we've
I'm waiting for it. I haven't.
We've gone way over schedule, so let's keep that all in mind as we go into the afternoon about trying to get back on schedule. Governor Stevens?
Has the ballots arrived yet? I haven't seen one in my mailbox, so I'm asking other governors if they've seen it yet.
It's coming.
It's coming. Okay.
They're out? All right, the ballots are in the Ethernet someplace, coming to your email addresses now. Okay. And I see Executive Director Nevitt and General Counsel Shanklin. All right, I think we're all here. Never a dull moment with you people. So we have the votes. We also have a request from Governor Higginson, I understand, for a ballot. She came in after the roll call, but during the counting of the votes. So before we wind up this election, I'm going to open this up to the Board of Governors to discuss what to do in this particular situation. And so I'm going to throw this out. I have one hand. Raise your virtual hands if you want to speak. Governor Grabicki.
It seems to me we went through a process here. We had nominations, we had the roll call, we had detailed presentations and questions that we all listened to, and then we voted. I think if somebody didn't participate in that process leading up to the vote, they're not eligible to vote.
Thank you, Governor Grabicki. Governor
I'd like to speak.
Higginson.
Thank
Governor
you.
Higginson.
Well, first of all, I've been working on a mediation position statement this morning, and I couldn't tell what the timing would be. I called in as soon as my meeting, I was done with what I needed to do. Coincidentally, that happened to be apparently right when you'd taken a break. I'm familiar with both candidates. I'm not aware of anything that would preclude me from voting, even though I didn't hear what they had to say individually during the public meeting. And I have been in contact with by email with you, Kyle, with Tara, then with Paris, saying for the last 20 minutes or more, I don't have a ballot. I've also seen emails from Dan Clark that he didn't have a ballot during the same period that I didn't have a ballot. And then I also heard from, I think it was Serena, that I can't see because my camera's not working right now, that she wasn't receiving a ballot. So to say that I should be precluded from voting because the ballots were being counted while I was asking for a ballot, when not all the ballots had even gone out, does not seem procedurally appropriate. So I'm asking that I be allowed to vote before you announce the result. It may or may not affect the result. I have no idea, but I would like to participate in this vote. I think it's my right as a governor. I'd like to be sure that Dan Clark and Serena also got their ballots and were able to vote as well. Thank you.
I understand that all of the governors who were present during the presentation and during the roll call have votes, have ballots and have voted. Governor Stevens, followed by Governor Knight.
Yeah. Yes, Mr. President, I don't like us trying to kind of make up the rules as we go along. So first of all, you didn't send out to anybody saying you must be present at these points to vote. You know, the baseline for voting is you are a governor, you are active as a governor at the time. And so, and as I've mentioned before, this is this limited universe. So it is not like any governor is unfamiliar with any of the candidates. I would hope that we would certainly allow Governor Higginson to vote, as opposed to, well, you weren't here for this or that or the other thing, because I did not understand that to be necessary for them to be able to vote. And so I would hope we would not go down that rabbit hole. And again, this is, I think, consistent with my comments before. You know, this we should keep very, very simple. It is not like we don't know each other. It is not like we don't have information that we need. And, you know, we really should not go down this path. And I was troubled that when Governor Higginson did come on, she was not able to get a ballot, you know, and I didn't know what the rules were, but I don't think the rules were established that, oh, if you weren't here, then you can't get a ballot either. And that should have been told to everybody if that's the case.
Make no mistake, I'm not advocating for one way or the other on this. I'm bringing it back to the Board of Governors. You all are going to make this decision. This is not me making up the rules. It's a little difficult to pinpoint the time that you vote, because as we all know, the times run long. And so I don't think, in fact, I don't think we've ever done that. We're going to vote precisely at this time, so that somebody can show up in the nick of time to do that.
So, Mr. President, I'm sorry, I need to make a parliamentary inquiry.
Parliamentarian Stevens.
Yeah, as opposed to talking about this, do you need a motion to allow Governor Higginson to have a ballot?
I wanted to have a discussion first, but yes, I'm seeking a motion.
Okay, well, I so move, and we can still have the discussion.
All right, I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second from Governor Williams-Ruth. Ms. Bynum, time constraints? Okay, we need to move this forward. Governor Knight.
So our bylaws have a detailed election procedure for president-elect and vacancies. That's at section 63, but for treasurer, it's very short. That's section 62. It just says the treasurer will be elected by a simple majority of governors voting. So we don't have the same procedure that we need to follow. In fairness, the section on treasurer is also not clear. It's fairly open, but since the sentence says the treasurer will be elected by a simple majority of governors voting, I read that as, you know, every governor is entitled to vote. I wouldn't want to limit any governor from voting. And I also want to make sure that Governor Sayani got a ballot, because I understand she was just sworn in and didn't get it. So okay, so all governors should be able to vote, in my opinion.
All right, Governor, President-elect Tollefson.
I agree with Governor Stevens, and also in the spirit of inclusion, Governor Higginson ought to be allowed to vote.
Thank you, President-elect Tollefson. Governor Clark.
I totally agree, and Kyle, I'm troubled. So yeah, thanks.
I don't know why you're troubled. Again, I'm bringing this back to the Board of Governors for your decision. I'm not making any decisions on this. In fact, I chose not to make a decision on this. So we're opening this up for discussion and for voting. Governor Stevens, did you have another comment? President-elect Tollefson, okay. Governor McBride, did I see your hand up? No. All right. I have a motion. I have a second. I have no further discussion. We'll do a roll call vote. Governor Angeville. Governor Higginson.
Aye.
Governor Boyd.
Aye.
Governor Clark.
Aye.
Governor Grabicki,
Nay.
Governor Pertzer, Governor Dresden,
Aye.
Governor Sayani, Governor Williams-Ruth,
Aye.
Governor Peterson,
Abstain.
Governor McBride,
Aye.
Governor Abel, Governor Knight,
Aye.
Governor Stevens.
Aye.
I have 8 in favor, 1 abstention, 1 no. Is that what you have, Executive Director Nevitt?
Yes. Excuse me.
Okay, motion carries. Governor Higginson, we're forwarding your vote now, your ballot. As soon as that comes in, then we'll have our election results.
Governor
Thank
Higginson, note that what I've learned in this process, it will take a few minutes to go through. Please text me and let me know when you've got it or when you're not getting it, and we'll make sure you get it.
All right, thank you. I'll do that.
Executive Director Nevitt, do we still have a guest, or have we dealt with our next item and when he might
So,
come back?
yes, so to try to get us back on schedule, the Court Rules Committee has graciously agreed to come back tomorrow. So we're going to move a few things around tomorrow. We do have, I've seen our guests from the Washington Leadership Institute arriving. I know you all have not, I do see some folks have gone to get lunch. So perhaps while we're finalizing the treasurer vote, people could go grab lunch and come back.
Aren't we scheduled to start filming a live presentation there? Shouldn't we just do that and hear the results after that?
Could be. What do you want to do, President Chiketti?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. That's a good idea.